Historical Happy Hour, the podcast that explores new and exciting historical fiction novels. I'm your host, Jane Healey, and in today's episode, I welcome Joanna Miller to discuss her debut novel, The Eights, which is getting all the buzz and which Fresh Fiction highly recommended, calling it impeccably researched and eloquently told. Welcome, Joanna. Thanks for doing this.
Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
So great. And so I'm going to dive in with the bio, and then I have a bunch of questions for you. So Joanna Miller was raised in Cambridge in the United Kingdom and studied English at Oxford University. After a decade in education, she set up an award-winning poetry gift business, and her rhyming verse has been filmed twice by the BBC. I have a question about that for sure. Miller recently graduated from Oxford again with a diploma in creative writing. She lives with her husband and three children in Hertfordshire. Am I pronouncing that correctly? Hertfordshire.
Hertfordshire. Yeah.
Hertfordshire. The Eights is her first novel. So again, welcome. Talk about the premise of this terrific story of four young women who blaze the trail at Oxford and how you came to write it.
Okay, well, so it's the story of the first women to study alongside men at Oxford in 1920 in the shadow of the Great War. There were women studying at Oxford before that, but they were the women that blazed the trail for these initial pioneers. And my story is about four women who move in together on staircase 8 of St Hugh's College and become firm friends in the face of male resentment and strict rules and their own personal secrets and traumas that become are revealed along the way. And I decided to write this book in lockdown, partly because my poetry business had gone very quiet. I had no customers and no weddings to write for and things like that. So I decided to do a Write Your Novel course. And it happened to be the 100th anniversary of women getting degrees at Oxford for the first time. And Oxford University had been sharing pictures, gorgeous black and white sepia photos of some very serious, say that again, some very serious-faced young women who looked not unlike my own daughter and her friends. So I wondered what had brought them there and what had been their experience of Oxford compared to the one I had in the 1980s. When I started to research, I realized, oh my goodness, the strict rules and the way that they were treated will make for a brilliant novel. And I combined that with a bit of local history about the town where I live, which had some soldiers there as a garrison in the First World War, and sort of combined the two and came up with the story of the Eights.
Excellent. Yes, so I want to talk about your research because you attended Oxford and you said that this novel was a joy to research. Talk about your research process, your discovery, and what, if anything, surprised you along the way.
Well, my research process was a little unorthodox because I'm not a historian. So I was sort of scrabbling around at first for where I could find information. But luckily, Oxford University had instigated a research project based on 100 years of women getting degrees. So I was able to use those resources. And luckily, because I'm an alumna of the university, I could go online and read them in their digital forms in the Bodleian Library archives. So that's where I started. I also read social memoirs and did an awful lot of Googling, of looking at places that I wanted to go to, and went to those places as soon as I could, as soon as lockdown was lifted. In fact, I dragged my husband and my dog at least 50 times, and I'm not exaggerating, round Oxford every Sunday morning, where we would have the familiar coffee stops and pit stops. And I would trace the routes that my characters would take and go to the buildings that they would have gone to. And I saw the town the city in every different season. So I could even accurately portray the color of the sandstone at different times of year, depending on how much sun was on it or how wet it was. So I was a little bit obsessive because I really got into all the fine details. I wanted it to be a very honest portrayal of what it was like to be a young woman at Oxford University in 1920. And that included the buildings, but also the experience that the women had and what they did day to day. So I was lucky enough to get into St Hugh's College after lockdown lifted and was able to look around the college and look in their archives at first-hand accounts by students in the 1920s, written in the most glorious blue ink, and answering questions about what they did with their time, who their favorite tutors were, did anyone ever get in trouble, what were their favorite anecdotes. So I was really lucky and privileged to see these, and also very relieved that the research that had done had proved accurate, and that, in fact, what I portrayed, or how I portrayed my girls living their lives, was, in fact, the way that a lot of these women at St. Hugh's had. And the best bit of all was I got to sleep overnight in the college. And by this point, I was completely convinced that my four characters were real and had existed. So I was walking around thinking, oh, that would have been Beatrice's room, and that would have been Dora's, and they would have walked down here, and that would have been at the time they rescued the kittens, and etc., etc. So I really was immersed in Oxford, and lucky I only live an hour away, so I was able to go a lot. And I ended up doing a diploma in creative writing while I was writing the book, because I got so caught up with the university again and how it felt to be there that I just wanted to be part of it. So I did a 2-year undergraduate diploma in creative writing alongside editing the novel with my English and US editors. So yeah, Oxford was very much an ongoing part of this book, and I channeled a lot of my own experiences of being a student there 3 times now.
Amazing. Yeah, and the research really shines through in the story. I love books where the setting almost seems like another character, like in the book. And that I felt that when I was reading this. I want to talk about, speaking of the 4 main characters, the 4 women, really distinct, well-developed: Dora, Beatrice, Marianne, and Otto. None of them are based directly on any of the women at the time. I think I got that they're from your notes that they're composites. Really, is that would you say? And how did you develop these characters? Like, what was kind of their origin stories, and what was your character, since this is your debut? Like, what was your character development process like?
Well, I began with a 2,000-word opening to the novel that I had to produce for my novel writing course. And so the subject of that was Dora. And I was writing about how Dora had come to the university but had lost her brother and her fiance in the war, and that Dora had lived in the town where I live now. And once I started writing about her and realizing that this sort of was a very much a community experience, this first year of studying alongside men, I realized that it wouldn't work just to have one character's perspective. I wanted to show more. After all, I was writing almost about a feminist movement, and about the result of 50 years of hard work and negotiation on the part of the women that came before. So it felt natural to write about a group of women. And for some reason, a group of 4 women felt natural. I don't know if it came from reading a lot of Little Women when I was younger, or watching Sarah Jessica Parker and her friends in Sex and the City. Who knows? But 4 felt right to me, and it also felt symmetrical and tied in with my sort of theme of the number 8 that runs through the novel. I wanted 4 women who were very different. To keep the reader interested and to keep them from confusing them too much, I had to make them very physically very different. So Beatrice is 6 foot tall, Otto is very short, Marianne is very pale with a long neck, and Dora is the beautiful English rose with dark curly brunette hair. And character-wise, I was looking at where these women would have come from and trying to represent the different backgrounds. So a lot of women that studied at Oxford came from families where the father was a vicar or a clergyman, because only they could be taught Greek and Latin to a high enough standard in order to get into the university. It wasn't taught very well in girls' schools. So I knew I had to have a vicar's daughter. I'd already got Dora, who lived in my town, which is a market town, so I needed her to probably have a father who owned a factory or a business. I then realized that I needed to represent the aristocracy. Not that many of them sent their children to university or their daughters to university. Their sons, yes, but not their daughters. So I thought that would be interesting to play around with. And Otto is the aristo with a gorgeous wardrobe and all the money to throw around. She's the rule breaker, and she's the funny one. So you need a funny one. It can't all be serious. And then there was Beatrice. I got really interested in the idea when I was researching of what it would be like to be the daughter of a suffragette. Because I realized that famous suffragettes, including Emily Davison, who threw herself onto the King's horse at the Derby and was killed and became a kind of national icon for that reason. She actually went to St. Hugh's for a term, and so I thought, right, I'm going to have one of them be the daughter of a famous suffragette who's been to St. Hugh's, and then I can explore that topic too. And about part of the reason being the women are there is that they've now got the vote and they can now do certain jobs that they couldn't do before, like work in the civil service. And then the final reason for them all being there was really, apart from their own sort of personal ambitions, was the fact that the war meant there weren't many husbands around. And there was a big pressure on women to either be able to support themselves financially or to move overseas to find a husband or to change the course of their lives and how they thought their lives were going to go, basically. So Dora in particular is quite worried about not finding a husband, and the only reason her mother has let her go to Oxford is because she knows the women are outnumbered 5 to 1. It's the best opportunity Dora has got. So
Right.
basically, I mean, I was investigating a lot of different ideas and themes surrounding the sort of women that would have gone at that
Mhm.
time.
Yeah, no, excellent. And so I want to talk about like because I ask every writer that comes on about process, and I'm particularly interested in yours because this was your first time out, and even though you have a literary background, so what was your novel writing process like? I always ask writers, are you a plotter? Are you a pantser? Like, do you plot the whole novel out first, or do you write by the seat of your pants? Just sit down every morning and type away? Like, what was your process like?
I think it was a bit of a mixture of both. I would have an idea that I knew was going to come next, and then I would work towards that. And then I would think, well, where can we go from there? And then ideas would branch out. I think when I got to around a third of the way through, I was very much more of a planner because I knew where it was going. But I think it was a bit pantsery at the beginning when I was feeling my way in. And also, I was learning how to write a novel because I hadn't tried to write a novel before. Although I did have a daily writing habit, it was rhyming verse, so slightly different. So I was finding my way a little bit at the beginning. But one of the most useful things that we discussed on our Write Your Novel course was the idea of creating a big chart. And I found that very, very useful. I got a really enormous piece of card and tracked the 3 terms that Oxford have, the seasons, what the weather would have been like, what plants would have been growing, what events were going on at the university and those particular terms, where each girl was going in her arc in terms of sort of crisis and resolution. And I have found that I'm actually quite visually stimulated. So as well as needing to go to Oxford and seeing the things I was writing about, I found it really helpful to plot things and have that sort of overarching, not in detail, but have an overarching sense of where we were going or I was going. Another thing that I did that really helped was color coding. So trying to balance between the 4 points of view, trying not to be too heavy to one person. So I would have phases where they would all have a different font or they'd all have a different color. And then I could look back and see where, where I needed to emphasize and where I needed to cut. I found managing the actual whole 90,000 words quite difficult because if you've never done it before and you've managed that sort of thing and you're working on a Word document, I think it can be quite overwhelming. Um,
Mhm. Yeah,
and
I could
I
relate.
remember asking, we used to have sort of famous authors come to talk to us on the course, and people would be asking them very intellectual questions, and then I'd be saying, so how do you manage 90,000 words? Do you just scroll down or do you just make it really, really small and so you can see all the pages?
Right, right. Yeah, it's
All those nitty gritties of actually physically managing it. But one thing I did do that I don't know how many other writers do was that I wrote key scenes first. So one of the first scenes I wrote is actually in the middle of the novel, and it's the one where everything changes for Dora. And I'm not going to say what happens, but you've read it and you'll know how key it is to the second half of the novel. And I wrote that fairly early on, probably when I'd only written about 10,000 words, but it appears about 40,000 words in. So I knew that the novel was shaping around this particular moment. And I found that quite useful. So it wasn't written in chronological order. I don't know
Oh,
how
that's
normal
interesting.
that is.
Say that again. I'm sorry.
I don't know how normal that is not to write it in chronological order.
I think that everyone's process is so different, and that's what fascinates me about talking to different writers, because I think that some do kind of write the big scenes, like the kind of turning point scenes, and they can write towards that. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
the beats of the story, and then I have a couple friends who are like, oh, I just sit down every morning and see what comes to me, and I'm like, what is that? Like, I'm much more a planner. Like, I have to know, like, at least have a rough roadmap of where I'm going. So yeah, it's fascinating. I'm very chronological though. I've only written like out of sequence a couple times, but like you said, it's like when that kind of scene comes to you that is going to matter. And you just kind of have to get it down. I think that yeah, so
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah.
So you use Microsoft Word. I know like most writers on here are either Word people or Scrivener, which I use, but I only use like 10% of its capabilities. But yeah, that's interesting too. So you don't use Scrivener at all.
No, I've heard of people over here that do, but I'm a bit of I'm a bit of a habitual sort of person, and well, it's
Mhm.
almost a case of sort of, I feel like I've done well with Word, so I should stick with Word.
Oh yeah, yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
Superstitious.
I always go to the same place on holiday. I'm that sort of person.
I get it. Do what works for you. Um, Another question I had relating to kind of process and the writing of this, it's told, as you mentioned, from the different girls' points of view, depending on the scene and where you're at in the story. There's also, it goes back and forth in time a little bit. Um, was that always the intent? And was that tricky? Because I haven't written a multiple POV novel yet, and I mean, of course, obviously works, but it strikes me as being a little bit tricky to manage.
Yeah, I did find it tricky. I wasn't sure whether I should have a one chapter per character point of view, or I should have the chapters moving between them, trying not to head hop too much. So I
Mhm.
was wondering how best to manage that. And I felt with four characters, I know other people can do this brilliantly, but I felt I didn't want to have a chapter per person, and then by the time I get to chapter 5, returning to the person whose story is in chapter 1. I felt that would be the reader would feel a disconnect from the character.
Mhm.
So I wanted to sort of keep rolling between them. So yeah, it's got this almost sort of filmic feel about it, I've been told. So you'll go into a chapter and you'll probably have 3 to 4 different points of view through that chapter. And I will choose the person for whom the point of view gives us the reader the best experience, basically, and
Mhm.
moves the story on. But I did sometimes find I would get to the point and think, oh, well, I've had too much of that person's view of everything. I must go back and perhaps think about it from somebody else's point of view. So there was a lot of revising and reworking and trying. Sometimes I would have to rewrite a scene from someone else's in someone else's voice, and therefore the sort of language and imagery that they would use that was so different from the original person that in fact it was just like starting the scene again. Um,
Oh yeah. So
so it was constantly working hard at it. I did
mhm.
because I was new to novel writing. I did quite a lot of study of the craft, particularly in the first 2 years when I was writing the first draft and then editing it. So if I felt I found something quite tough, then I might go and do a quick course on it or read up on it or get some help from my mentor, so that I could refine, the areas that I thought were potentially weaknesses. Um,
Mhm.
yeah, I mean, I really enjoyed that. I'm a bit of a lifelong learner, as you've probably gathered. I'm sorry, my dog has decided to scratch the bed really
Oh,
loudly over
he's
there.
so cute. Mine's
Do,
upstairs. I keep seeing his little
do,
head.
do you mind, Birdie? Because we're having an interview.
So
So
cute.
sorry about that, everybody. Yeah, I did find it hard, but I learnt all the time.
Yes.
I wouldn't necessarily do it the same way next time, but perhaps I would. But I will be starting with key scenes, that's for sure. I just find that it sort of explodes my excitement and my interest in the story by thinking about a very dramatic moment.
Yeah, yeah, that makes total sense. I love you have your historical note at the end. You have a glossary, a timeline, a bibliography, like all the stuff that historical research nerds love. I love all this stuff. I even noticed that in your author's note, and I get so obsessive like this too. Like you noted about you had to change the weather in January because it wasn't the weather on record at the time. It was actually a balmy January, and you made it colder. So how did how did you balance the historical facts of the story of the time with the fictional story that you were telling? Like, and were there any strict rules you adhere to? How did you manage that balance?
Well, I think one rule I had for myself was I wanted to tell the story and the lifestyle of the first women at Oxford as accurately as possible, as a kind of tribute, because no one else has really written a novel about this experience. I think the closest we get to it that I know of is Pip Williams' novels that are set just before this time in Oxford. So I wanted to do them justice. So I wanted that all to be correct, and I wanted to pick out though the more interesting parts. The times where they have to walk out of the theatre because it's 11:15. If they don't get home at 11, they're going to be sent down by the principal and punished, severely. So I enjoyed picking out what I thought were the interesting historical facts and emphasising those, and perhaps playing down the more mundane ones as but I pretty much knew straight away that these would be fictional characters, just because it would be hard to write about four people and find out about their lives. It would give me so much more freedom to write their arcs and decide what happened to them. What I did do is populate the novel with quite a few cameos of real people. So the principal of St. Hugh's had such an interesting life. There was no point fictionalizing her. I couldn't have done a better job than the actual real version. It was so entertaining. And there's a bit of Vera Brittain, and some famous tutors that I kept, which I felt gave authenticity to the environment, and emphasized also that I wasn't focusing on perhaps famous tutors or famous students like Vera Brittain, or women that have gone on to do very, very famous things. I was focusing on perhaps the more ordinary women who sometimes struggled with their studies, with being able to afford to be there. And I know that we today would not see them as ordinary women, but they saw themselves as ordinary women. In fact, Vera Brittain describes them in her memoir, Testament of Youth, as those sorts of women at Oxford as, quote, the lower millstone. So there was an intellectual slobbery about some of the women that turned up there, for looking for husbands or looking to extend their school life, etc. So yeah, I thought it would be very interesting to just sort of pick and choose, balance between what was real and what wasn't. And it felt like a little bit of a privilege actually to sort of read a bit of research and think, well, I won't have that. Oh, but I will have that juicy little,
Yeah, yeah.
and I was finding those juicy little bits right until the last moment, till I was writing the acknowledgements,
Oh, wow.
and thinking, oh, I've got to put that in. That's just great. So a lot of the things that happen to the girls, although the girls are fictional, pretty much everything that happens to them is real. So for example, there isn't a debate where they discuss whether women have a right to be at Oxford. And it's a key part of the novel. And there was a debate like that in 1926, as I explain at the back of the novel. And they debated, should women's colleges be razed to the ground? And the motion was passed. So, I mean, that was disastrous. I'm not going to tell you whether the motion in my novel was passed or not, but it was sometimes a case that that fact was so fictional. It served the purpose. It made a brilliant novel and a great story for itself.
Oh yeah, and it is really hard to believe that this was not that long ago. I mean, and the way that women were treated and the way that women's education was treated, it's kind of astonishing when you think about it now. I mean, my daughters are both in college, and yeah, it's such a different world, but yet, only like a generation or so ago. So yeah, really, really interesting.
I was there 60 years after the novel is set, or 67 years after to be exact, 1987. And I don't think things have changed that much. And a lot of people that I've spoken to agree that they've changed more since 1987 than they did in the period between when the novel is set and when I went. I went to a
Wow.
former men's college that had just let in women, and it was built for men, and it was run in a very masculine sort of way. For example, we were young girls living on a mixed staircase where we had to go upstairs 2 or 3 flights to go to the toilet in the middle of the night. We had a male cleaner or scout, as they're called in Oxford, who would come into our bedrooms in the morning and open the curtains and sort of leer at us. And we
Oh,
were 18 years old. We didn't know whether this was allowed or not.
yeah.
So there was a lot that needed to change still.
Wow, that's really interesting.
Yeah.
Unbelievable, really. Yeah, yeah. I'm glad it's improved since then, but that's unbelievable. Um, so that this is your debut. Have you always wanted to write novels? Have you always wanted to be a novelist, or is this something you've had in the back of your head, or is it just kind of came about with this story?
I think if you'd said to me about the age of 18, what was it you'd really like to do? What would be your kind of goal or dream? I would have said to write a novel, but I would never have believed that I could actually do it. And it was only until I was 50 that I had the confidence to. And there are various reasons why that came about. One of them is that my sister is a novelist, and
Oh,
she's 8 years younger than me. She lives in Australia. Her name's Ali Lowe. She's written 4 best-selling novels out there, crime novels. And I think knowing someone close to you that can do this and has achieved it, I think makes it feel more believable for a start. And she encouraged me
oh.
to take the Write Your Novel course. So she's been a huge inspiration and influence and encouragement. And the best piece of advice I've ever had for her when I was worrying about, how to get through about the first third of the first draft was to, stop messing about. I won't say her exact words because they're a bit rude. Stop messing about and just get on with it. And that was really, really handy advice. So the fact that when I think I got to 50 and became menopausal, I thought, I don't care what people think anymore. I'm just going to go and do it. There's such amount of sort of bravado that comes with not caring. And I think lockdown had something to do with it as well. This sort of sense of we come to face with our own mortality and the world that we've come to know, and that everything that is kind of routine around us changes, and perhaps maybe our ways of thinking change too about what is possible and about what the world can be or maybe. So I think I was a little thrown up. My life was thrown up in the air like everybody else's, and this is,
Mhm.
it fell down with this sort of suggestion of what are you going to do with your time. My business had also took me from writing every day to not writing. So I used to write for weddings and big events. I used to create products that sold in big shops. So when all that demand disappeared, I was not getting a creative outlet. But I think
Yeah.
the one thing that surprised me more than anything was that when I actually started this course and started writing, I was actually quite good at it. And I think it came from years of teaching, years of studying classic works, years of writing every day, and most importantly, years of voracious reading, reading all the time,
Yes.
and admiring writers, admiring novelists. They always have been my rock stars.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
so yeah, it was always buried, but not something I ever thought was for me, that I thought was for other people. So
Yeah.
just so it's never too late, is it?
No, 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 no. It's so amazing. And so, talk a little bit about your poetry business. Essentially, like what did you do? And I think that discipline of having to write all the time or write on deadline. I used to do freelance, journalism work, and the discipline of a deadline, I think, definitely helps in terms of like trying to take a bigger, long form project like a novel. So, what was your work like, and how is that kind of writing different than this kind of writing?
Well, my sister and I have always had a really bizarre knack of being able to rhyme everything. And we would write silly poems for special occasions. And I've been doing it since I was a child. I remember I wrote one for my grandparents' 50th wedding anniversary in rhyme. And I think it was quite probably a bit Roald Dahl influenced, at the time where the revolting rhymes came out. So I would be writing these for everybody, all and sundry, and I do it for a bottle of wine or a bunch of flowers. And I got to my 40th birthday party and, read out my poem. And some of my husband's drunken friends came up to me and said, I'd pay good money for a poem like that to read out at my own event. And we were just at that stage in our lives where kids were getting christened, people were getting married, parents were turning, 60, 70. And so I thought, okay, set up a website. I wasn't working as a teacher because I just had my third child. And so I thought, well, I could do this, in the middle of the day when he's asleep, and set up a website. And suddenly I just started to get lots of orders. And then the people that had heard the poems at their events would start ordering them. And then their friends would start ordering them. And then I had to get a team of people in to help me write them. And then I started to sell on some equivalents of Etsy over here in the UK, and on Etsy, but there's one called Not on the High Street, which was doing really well here at the time. And I decided to make some products. So they said, why don't you write some shorter poems and make little posters of them, or put them on mugs or makeup bags or cards. And so we ended up buying machinery, taking on a studio, making all sorts of things. So it might be a mug that said stroppy before coffee, or uh, killing time before wine. So it might it just might rhyme, or on makeup bags, it would be sort of similar, lusher in blusher, diviner in eyeliner, or something like that. So the theme was always rhyme, and we made calendars, whatnot. I mean, it was a great time. And I only employed mothers that worked from 10 to 2. And we only had one rule, which was if your kid had a show at school, then you had to go to the show.
Nice.
You were allowed the time off. So it's flexible working for mums, basically.
Amazing. So amazing.
So but it taught me with constantly writing these poems for special occasions, was when we sent out the questionnaire and the answers came back, it taught me to be able to spot very quickly what an interesting detail was and how to tell a story. So
Yes.
with a beginning, a middle, and an end, and with always having the listener or the reader in mind. So,
Hmm.
so when I came to writing a novel, I think I was already thinking about the reader, and thinking about it in perhaps more of a commercial way than other people might have been if they'd been in my situation of starting without having any experience. So I think it all helped.
Absolutely. Oh yeah, absolutely. So fascinating. So now this came out in April. So what has been the most surprising part of being a debut author?
Oh gosh. Well, I was pretty surprised when Putnam invited me over to America in October. Yay,
Yes.
Putnam, thank you. And I got to do a fantastic tour. So with proof copies with 5 other authors, 4 from the UK. And we visited New York, Chicago, San Francisco, and LA, and we met bookstagrammers, journalists, people from Goodreads, all sorts of bookshop owners, and we had just the most wonderful time. And that was a completely unexpected, huge perk, and something that I will remember for the whole of my life.
Oh,
Um,
nice.
it was really, really special. And there have been many wonderful moments. For example, when Tracy Chevalier's quote from the novel Blur, which is on the front of the novel, came through, and I was driving back from London. It was late at night over here, but not for you guys. And it just dropped into my inbox, and I could see it said, my editor Tara said, "Oh, we've had a lovely quote in from somebody. It's from Tracy." And then I couldn't read the rest of the email because I had to click on it. And I thought, oh, it must be some ordinary Tracy. Tracy who then? Tracy Smith, Tracy. I can't think of a Tracy that I know. I know. Oh well, And then I clicked on it and I saw it was Tracy Chevalier. I was like, oh my God. And obviously there was a bit of screaming. And then the first thing I did was ring my sister in Australia because it was the evening. It was the morning for her, and we did some more screaming. And yeah, so that was a really wonderful moment.
Oh, that's wonderful. I know. I like I've had to, get blurbs for my books, and And especially for my first one, like I've never forgotten that kindness, of these authors who are so kind and generous to take the time to read and endorse your book, especially like, a big name and they don't know you that well. And it's just amazing. Like people's kindness and generosity in this industry is really lovely.
Oh, I completely agree.
Yeah.
And especially women of my age. I don't know whether it is something about that, that sort of beginning a new journey at the age of 50 maybe appeals to other people of the same age. But even, bookstagrammers, the time they take to share your
Hmm.
book, the care they take in reviewing it and taking beautiful photographs. It's really, really wonderful, wonderful. The booksellers who
Really.
paint their book windows with the front of the UK edition, which is different to the US edition. So I'll just show that. It's got a little
Yeah.
there's got a little woman riding on a bicycle, and it makes for a good window display, that bottom section.
I love
Um,
them both, and I'm always so interested in like the choices that are made because I mean they're both beautiful, but just very very different. Yeah, I don't know like what how they decided, but they both work. And apparently this is one's going to work better in the U.S. I don't know, but it's so funny.
I love them both. Don't ask me to
Yeah,
choose. It would be two Sophies
no.
joining.
Yeah, no, they're both, yeah, because I noticed that one when I was doing research for the interview, and yeah, it's completely different, but still, but beautiful in its own, in just a different way. Yeah, so funny. And I will tell you too regarding like Instagrammers and I knew of this book before we had booked this interview. I mean, it was definitely getting the buzz on social media, and so congratulations on that too, because that's not easy. So yeah.
Thank you. I think sometimes things happen to me, and I'm not sure whether they happen to everybody else or not. And my agent often says to me, "You do know this doesn't ordinarily happen."
That's right.
So yeah, I mean, I've been so blessed, so lucky, and believe me, I have appreciated every single moment, and I am soaking it up. I'm really, really enjoying it. Yeah, I know it's a cliche, but it has definitely been a dream come true. That's for sure.
Oh, yeah, I'm so happy to hear that. I have a couple more questions. I don't want to take up too much more of your time. Are you ready to share what you're working on next?
I can give you a little bit of a clue. It's set 10 years before the Eights, roughly, and it's regarding suffragettes.
Oh, nice. Oh,
Yeah.
exciting. Yeah. Oh, that's great.
It's
Um,
something that I felt that I would like to have discussed more in the Eights, but there just
yeah.
wasn't the place for it.
Oh, excellent. Well, everyone will look forward to that, I'm sure. So, and how can readers best keep in touch with you
Through social media, I'm most active on Instagram.
on Instagram?
Um,
Okay.
but my contact details are on my website as well.
And your website is joannamiller.com or
Joanna Miller, author.
Joanna
Yeah.
Miller, author. Okay, got it. Excellent. Joanna, this was delightful. Thank you so much. Congratulations on all your success with this beautiful debut. And I hope it continues to soar. And hopefully you can come on Historical Happy Hour for your next book as well.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me. It's been lovely. And congratulations on your work as well. I
Oh,
can see the latest
thank
book background
oh,
there.
thank you so much. Yeah, and for the audience, next up is Alka Joshi on May 20th, and that one will be live on at 7 p.m. Eastern time on May 20th, and you can register at janehealey.com. Thank you again, Joanna, and best of luck and take care. Thanks. Bye bye.